Okay, I think we can start. I hope you can hear me. Hello, everyone. I am Aurora, and I am the project manager of this event. First of all, I wanted to thank you for joining my startup debut, Food Meets Tech, and I'm very happy to see all of you here. I believe most of you, especially the Helsinki or Finland-based ones, have already heard about the shortcut and about what we do, but I'm going to quickly introduce our organization anyway for the ones who don't know us yet, because I'm thrilled to see that we have quite an international audience this time. The shortcut is the largest talent accelerator in the Nordics. Wait a sec. Okay. We keep talent with the skills they need to accelerate growth and innovation in order to enhance and expand the startup community, also thanks to events like this. We are a non-profit organization, part of Startup Foundation and a sister organization to Slash, Maria01, Wave Ventures, and Junction. Before we start, I wanted to thank the speakers, Lauri, Pasi, and Alejandro, the moderator, Peik, my teammates, and all of you for making my startup debut happen. I truly hope you will enjoy it. Now, since this event is part of the Mege project, I leave the virtual floor to my colleague Namrata, the marketing coordinator for Mege, who's going to briefly introduce it. So let's give a virtual big round of applause to Namrata.
Thank you, Aurora. Hi, everybody. I am Namrata Sethi. I'm the marketing coordinator for Mege. Mege is a project with Aalto University, Helsinki, Haga, Helia, and the Shortcut, which promotes entrepreneurship with international talent. In this, we have these various events which are related to entrepreneurship. And if anybody of you is looking to start your entrepreneurship journey, do check out the website. And if you have any queries, you can get in touch with me. And I hope you guys enjoy this event. So I think we should get started with the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Namrata. So, Peik, the floor is yours if you want to start.
Super. I guess my audio is on. So it's something I have to check. Yes, maybe. Yeah, awesome. Okay, I got it. Cool. Thanks. Hey, welcome to the event also on my behalf. I'm Peik. What I do on a daily basis when I'm not hosting an event or a panel discussion is I run my own startup called Fixari. And what we do is we help especially seniors with their everyday life with tech. So we basically provide on-demand tech help now remotely, but once this epidemic is over, also at home. And for us, if we look at food tech, I mean, food is something that everybody needs to eat every single day, and especially among our customers. One thing that has really come up is the new methods of ordering food home. So that's how I personally have really, during the past maybe 2 months, been looking into the food tech scene, and that's why I think it's super interesting to hear today maybe about some of the more future stuff happening in this scene. The idea today was that we'll have a panel discussion with 3 awesome panelists, and what we'll basically be discussing are the things related to the food tech scene. So the idea was that we'll start with, so we'll have 3 themes. We'll start with starting the scene. So I've heard that there are a lot of people in this event today who are potentially interested in the scene, potentially interested in starting their own company or maybe joining a food tech company. So we'll talk about kind of joining the scene, how to get involved. Then we'll talk about the scene today. What are the interesting things happening, maybe interesting companies that are, there we go. So what are the interesting things happening today? And then the third theme and the last theme of today's event will be the future of food tech. And then we'll again talk about what's happening in the future in food tech, how will we be eating in the next 10 years, and then other things related to that. And like you saw right when we started, we'll also then end this discussion today with questions from the audience. So if you have any great questions to the panelists today, you can send them in the comment section, and then the 5 best ones will be chosen, and then I'll ask those from the panelists here today. super simple setup. And I think we are ready to get going. So we'll start with the intros. We'll go over the panelists. They'll get to share their stories, who they are, where they come from, and then we'll get to start from there. So first up, I would like to introduce Lauri up on to the virtual stage here. Lauri has had quite a ride during the last 3 to 5 years. He has been working at VTT, which is the Finnish research agency here, doing all kinds of amazing stuff. Got chosen to Singularity University over in California, later became a faculty member, and now has founded a VC firm that especially invests in food tech companies. So Lauri, if I can get you up live up on the screen, I have the first question to you. I would like to hear just shortly, how did you end up in this point? Why is food tech your thing that you're so passionate about?
I mean, we could start way back from like childhood trauma. I think food has always been really, really, really close to me, and then kind of technology and science came to the play. So I studied biotechnology. That's my core background. Did research in that, got my PhD in industrial biotechnology. And then I worked for a while at VTT in research and innovation strategy. But basically working with those beautiful 2,000 brains in that institution, figuring out how to move innovation and research kind of more efficiently out of that research context and into real world to solve those real problems that we have. And then came a beautiful opportunity in form of a small team to start a food tech VC fund, and that to me felt like a great way how to, instead of pushing that innovation out of research, kind of pulling the innovation out of research, still working with researchers, still working with scientists, entrepreneurs, and making those technological visions reality.
Awesome. A lot of questions for you. We'll keep those in store for the next parts. Next up, I would like to introduce up onto the virtual stage here, Alejandro, who is originally from Colombia, started the business in London and is now based from Copenhagen. Could you just shortly share your story and then the funding story behind the Kaffe Bueno?
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Alejandro, and I'm one of the founders of Kaffe Bueno. We actually started Kaffe Bueno in Denmark. In London, we were studying together, the three of us, the three founders. We were studying international business and management, and we studied with mostly Scandinavian people. And if you put Scandinavians and Colombians, there will always be coffee. So we immediately noticed the difference in perception of the same thing, coffee, but how it changed depending on where we came from, where our backgrounds. They saw it as a symbol of this cozy times, friendly family, and so on. We saw it more from from the perspective of the coffee farmers and how come a coffee shop owner in London was filling in their pockets while the person who we owe the existence of coffee, a coffee farmer in Colombia, doesn't even know what they're gonna eat tonight. So we started looking into ways how we can valorize or extend coffee's life cycle in order to add value to the raw material. Then we realized how much coffee is produced in the world, around 10 billion kilos, and that 1% of the 1% of its health benefits end up in your cup and the rest is thrown away as waste. So we developed a way to upcycle coffee waste into ingredients for cosmetics, nutraceuticals, and functional foods. And about the funding, yeah, a little bit of a long story, but we'll talk about it throughout the conversation.
Awesome. So it sounds super interesting, super techy, and then something that, I mean, it's weird that people haven't realized kind of the, things they're actually throwing away. And it's awesome to see that you're able to kind of reuse things and then turn that into some new product. Awesome. Then I'd like to introduce the last panelist of today's discussion. He's Pasi from Solar Foods, and they create food out of thin air, which is just bonkers. So just not on a too technical level, Pasi, how does this kind of work?
Actually, it's quite simple fermentation technology. So there is an analog, for example, to winemaking, where in winemaking, I assume most of you've done wine at home or beer, some kind of fermentation, or at least familiar. So there you have a fermenter. You have a sugars liquid, and you put in yeast, which happens to be such that it makes alcohol to surrounding liquid. So turning sugar, which is an agricultural product, to alcohol, a bit growing as well at the same time. So we're doing basically the same, but we have a different organism that is high in protein, but it doesn't eat sugar, but it eats small bubbles of hydrogen and carbon dioxide. And instead of sugars, we ferment these gases, and we can make hydrogen with electricity by splitting water. So that's how we charge energy into the system, and that's instead of sunlight, the microbes get their energy. And we are also operating a direct air capture device and technology that has history in the space tech to clean the cabin air from carbon dioxide. So we apply this technology to capture CO2 from the air, and basically from these main ingredients, then the cells can live out and grow, multiply. We take the cells out, dry them, and you end up with a powder that is almost identical to soy. And the organism, what we use is completely natural, that we have screened from the nature. So basically, this is perhaps the most natural food you've ever had when we hit the shelves.
Awesome. Okay, I maybe got like 80% of that, but maybe, I mean, throughout the discussions, I'll understand this slightly more in depth. Awesome. Okay, so now we'll start with the first topic. Like I said before, we'll talk or start our discussion from kind of starting the scene, why food tech is important. And maybe to just start off the discussion, I would ask Lauri just a simple question. I mean, why should anybody care about food tech?
Because we all need to eat. And we all need to eat on this planet. Unless you happen to have a vehicle to get you out of this planet, I mean, let me know. But as long as you don't have, we all need to live together on this planet and eat every day. So food tech is fundamentally important to all of us. I mean, the point where I see the whole human society as such is built on, well, hunting, gathering, and then agriculture, and then more advanced agriculture, and now on these new technologies. So it's a fundamental basis of our existence and life on the planet. So I cannot imagine any more fundamental and important topic to work on.
Cool. Well, then actually I'm going to go into Pasi. You previously had worked within the energy sector, doing a lot of interesting, really deep tech stuff there. What got you interested in the food tech? Why did you kind of jump in from a very technical side or technical industry into another rather technical industry? What got you interested?
Basically in energy, and what we're doing now is has several similarities, but what we're mainly using at Solar Foods is cell as a factory. If you want to produce something very complex, like amino acids or food ingredients, it might be convenient to have a cell as a factory to produce something so complicated. How I got here, well, that was empowered by personal crisis. When it's correct that until the end of 2017, actually, we both worked at VTT with Lauri, and I was in charge of the single largest renewable energy research programs, what we've had nationally until the end of 2017. And 75% of the greenhouse gas emissions due to human action is due to energy, burning fuels, basically, the operation of mining and oxidizing this carbon and letting it, dumping it to the atmosphere. And we were studying 100% renewable energy systems, solar, wind, hydro, so on, with all the energy storages of different kinds. And many things around the Internet of Energy and how we can, build this system. And the technology is there for the energy system. Bill Gates says that we need a breakthrough, but actually we don't. The technology is there. Electric vehicle is a classical example. But then it was a key finding for me that even if we would install all those technologies globally tomorrow, it wouldn't be enough to save the planet for climate change and many other crises such as water and pesticides and stuff like that, because about at least 1/4 of the greenhouse gas emissions is due to what we eat, and the population is increasing, standard of living is increasing, which means usually that more animal products are consumed. So it was depressing for me to find out that actually it wouldn't be enough to install all those energy technologies. But we also had findings in that research. Technically, one was that electricity is the new primary energy. So instead of burning, you need to electrify. Whether it's renewables or nuclear, it's another story. So that's one, electrify everything. Again, electric vehicle is a classical example of electrification, how the individual is empowered by many different ways, which is also another story. And then the second finding was that if we want fuels for aviation, even medicine, plastics, so on, we can actually produce those from the CO2 from the air and ended up at the research institute to make fuels from air, which are simple molecules. So basically with this history, it's easier to understand, and we started to think that, okay, can you actually turn electricity to edible calories to disconnect from the land use and everything what it has to do? And then Juha-Pekka had actually a solution that there are these cells that can use these ingredients, and we made the proof of concept and then decided to go for a company. So there is a logical history, but without personal crisis, there wouldn't be the driver to push it there.
Exactly. Okay. Well, Alejandro, from what I've understood, your background is slightly different. You don't have, you come more of a business background from what I've understood, and you actually had to learn on the go how this whole kind of reusing used beans works. So could you maybe share your story of how, from like a completely different background, you just taught yourself basically of the basics of how your idea could actually work in real life, and actually are now in the process of scaling that whole concept up into bigger scale?
Yeah, my story is the opposite way around. We graduated. When I say we, I mean my two co-founders and I. We graduated from a business school, so we didn't know anything about biotechnology or biochemistry. We had a lot of knowledge, of technical knowledge regarding coffee itself, because we had worked in the industry before, but that's about it. But when you learn how to roast coffee, you learn a lot about the chemistry of coffee and how do you manipulate external factors to influence or to extract certain things. So while we were learning about roasting, we got simply curious. Well, for what is a polyphenol? What can you use it for? Essential fatty acids. Shit, there's a lot of essential fatty acids in coffee. What can we use them for? Are they still there after the coffee has been consumed? And then after a lot of research, we realized that, yeah, mostly everything remains in the spent coffee grounds. But there was a major barrier for companies not taking advantage of spent coffee grounds, which is moist, which revolves around the moisture that is left inside the grounds. So they deteriorate immediately. And we saw other companies using it for composting, mushrooms, biofuels. But then from a business perspective, that didn't make sense to us because there was a lot of volume required for little value. So we started thinking, how can we extract the most value out of the least amount of volume? And then that took us to, okay, what technologies do we need in order to extract the compounds that are valuable in different industries? So we looked at it more from I wouldn't say purely commercial because it's very technical, but we started off more from the market potential, and then we started, and simultaneously reading a lot about the health benefits of those different compounds. and then came up with different ways on how to extract them. And yeah, I mean, initially we came to Denmark with an entrepreneurial visa that the Danish government gave us after revising our business plan. And we initially started importing coffee from Colombia and selling it to companies in order to basically make some revenue while we were able to fully scale, or to demonstrate that we were able to do what we were thinking that we could do, if that makes sense. So in the day we were selling coffee, in the night we were teaching ourselves biochemistry and biotechnology.
So just kind of hacking your way through the whole thing. Lauri had something. Yeah, go ahead.
I could kind of elaborate on this a bit. I mean, you asked why food is so important, but you could elaborate that a bit to why is food so important right now. Yeah. And there's obviously, I mean, like we all know, there's massive difficulties, massive struggle ahead in the whole food system, coming from the climate change, but also loss of biodiversity. You know, we're running out of resources on the planet. Like Pasi said, we need a lot more food because we consume more and more food all the time. So obviously there's this massive transition that we have to go through in the future. There's a massive need for innovation in the food system. But at the same time, I find this very interesting what both of the guys said, that we all are actually coming from kind of out of the food system into the food system. So Pasi is coming from energy research and figuring out something completely new for the food system, and Alejandro as well coming from kind of outside of the food system and innovating something new. So I think what's kind of interesting in this time that we're living is that technologies are merging, and technologies are jumping from one domain to another, from energy systems to food systems, and that's going to create this completely new landscape of potential in food and also in many other technologies.
Yeah,
and at the same time, food also impacts other industries. Like many food ingredients are getting into cosmetics and even pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceutical companies are now investing and acquiring nutraceutical companies that use natural extracts to cure long-term diseases like diabetes, for example.
Yeah. So in that sense, I mean, if you would ask, you know, why to get involved in the food tech, you might actually be involved in the food tech, whatever you're doing, or you might at least tomorrow be involved in food tech, whatever you're doing now.
Yeah, now that is a really good point. That, you know, just things are getting more and more intertwined together, and everything is connected somehow to everything else. Maybe Pasi, just to kind of continue on this idea. So how did you kind of, if you just go into the concrete things, how did you actually get started? You said that you wanted to make a proof of concept with the idea that you had. How did that kind of how did that go? I mean, how did you prove that? Did you actually need to get like huge amounts of funding to be able to make some kind of a prototype, or how did you kind of hack your way through a demo that you could show that, you know, this idea that you had would actually work?
Yeah, we were lucky enough to make the proof of concept at the Research Institute site. So there was something else than only slides, which the investors appreciate. So there would be, it is working, and that's good enough for those that go for the very early stage, seed stage. So if they believe in the team and there is something that is proven to work in practice, whatever scale, that's a good starting point. We were lucky to be able to do it at the Research Institute. Then again, we were very lucky to then find good investors who are forward-looking, and some can tolerate the risk and the timeline in go-to-market. So some more than others. So basically, it was a good match there to start with.
Awesome. Let's jump back into Lauri. So you actually just kind of announced that you had like 24.5 million euros or so together for your first fund, and I assume you're now starting to look at investments. What are kind of the criteria that you're looking with teams, you know, that you're investing in? With food tech, I assume with a lot of companies, there is a lot of research that has to be done before there's actually like a physical product. So, you know, compared to maybe your typical SaaS startup, which might have something hacked together in a weekend, probably in food tech, I would assume in most cases, it takes, you know, a lot longer to actually have something to show. So what kind of teams are you looking for? What are the, what's your hypothesis on what types of teams will be successful in the future?
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Scaling food tech can take a lot more time than scaling a software company, for example, because you quite often need to make a physical product. Not always, obviously. There's a lot of digital platforms around food as well. What we specifically are looking for the new fund is technology companies that will somehow renew the food system into something more sustainable. So there needs to be a technological core, something that creates something really new. And it needs to have a sustainable impact to the food system. So quite often, like Pasi mentioned, there might be some initial technologies that are already out there, in companies or in research institutions. And that's a really good start. But after you have that first proof of concept, there is still a long way to launch that product or sell that project. And that's the journey we're very willing to go through with the companies. But obviously sustainability is one angle that we cannot ignore when it comes to food. We believe that the only sustainable business in the future, the only kind of business there will be in the future is sustainable business, and it needs to be good for the environment, environmentally sustainable, but also good for the people eating the food, so health-wise sustainable. So those things kind of have to come together somehow to make it a good investment.
Let's then go into Alejandro, to you. I mean, you started the company with, I guess, 2 other co-founders. Is that correct? Yeah. Kind of, and then you said that you have very similar backgrounds, which sometimes is a problem in teams. Sometimes when you set up a team or set up a company, you want people from different backgrounds with different types of skills, so that you kind of complement each other. But in your case, how have you kind of made this? Is it so that if you have similar backgrounds, do you still have like something that everybody kind of brings to the table, or is it so that you have kind of start to kind of specialize in certain parts of the company within your kind of founding team? How have you kind of, what are the skills you think you need, and then how have you kind of from like a similar background, how are you kind of developing the team so that you can, you know, actually realize the product and turn an idea into a proper business?
So yeah, that's often a question that is asked because we are business guys, but at the same time, there are many different areas within business, and actually we have a pretty solid foundation in our team. Even though we studied roughly the same, we have very different roles in the team. The first year, of course, we were a little bit of an octopus, each of us, doing a little bit of everything each. But then we soon realized how we can complement each other. So, for example, Juan has been more in the technical development and innovation. Camilo is in the finances and operations, and I'm more in the commercial side, looking at which applications are the best in terms of markets to penetrate of the different products that we produce. But then, of course, we have to collaborate with a lot of knowledge institutions around Europe. Initially, actually, the first big milestone that we achieved was an innovation grant by the Danish Innovation Fund, which allowed us to partner up with the Danish Technological Institute, so we could basically prove that we could extract oil from coffee. Because initially nobody believed us because we were just three early 20s Colombian guys in Denmark, and we found the technology that we needed. But then, well, the people in the laboratories, they didn't believe us. They were like, yeah, what do you know? So we sent the coffee to China, we extracted the oil there, came back, hey, we can do it, and then they gave us the grant. And yeah, since then, of course, we have added more people into the team with technical background, and we are looking to expand the team now that we are raising another seed round of investment.
Awesome. Let's kind of take a little bit and drill deeper into kind of this idea of partnerships. So Pasi, for example, what kind of partnerships or collaborations have you utilized in order to kind of get your tech up and running and, you know, get more visibility on what you do? Do you have kind of public partnerships that you can share, and how did those come about? How were you able to get them up and running?
You mean like customers or somehow related to technology, or which perspective?
I mean, it could be anything. I mean, what were the things that helped you kind of get off the ground? Be either customers or kind of, I don't know, research partners or, yeah.
It's, I guess it, two answers. First is that customer is the king. So there are two kinds of startups: those who have customers and those who don't. And that makes a huge difference in many respects. It's a new category in the world where you enter when you have turnover. We have learned that because we are at least 2 years from turnover today. So if there is initially a customer, so you can do very early sales, even in small numbers or quantities, that's hugely valuable. So that's part of the partnership or a customer. So there could be some kind of a partner and customer or co-developer, how you to begin with, even something small evidence on the traction, as they say, which means market and sales. That's one part. Then you need, on top of that, luck. So networking, meet people, and there are different people with different backgrounds, and you learn on the way, which is very valuable. Then on the other hand, even if the partnerships are important, we have learned it very well in the past 1 year, is that the startup itself, when the Lauri's fund comes in or a venture capitalist come in, they start to look at what the company has. So you have to have some sales and things like that, something what enables you, but it is essential to understand that all the value and important things are built within the company. So instead of establishing quite complicated agreements on whatever setup, licensing or external service that is critical to companies, actually a no-go. Rather, the investors want to put the money, so you hire the people to do it, so that it stays in the company. So therefore, the idea of the venture capital industry, which is a bit of a gray area because it's hard to find these people in a way that there are some databases and websites and so on, but still it's like an octopus that you never know where these people appear. But it's very important to understand that it's a huge industry, and if you start to go along a venture capital funded path as your company, there is not really lack of money. But if you can create the value and the outlook, the investors are happy to invest to the value what you create, and there you don't have to be shy in the use of money.
That's a really good point. Alejandro, did you have that?
And I think there's also like coming back to the like having enough market traction to gain investment. There's always this kind of gap that the long time to market in a food tech startup creates. So, for example, a SaaS company, software as a service startup, might acquire 100,000 clients overnight, and then investors love that and they are willing to put money in because all of the money is going to salaries that will be dedicated to gain more customers. Whereas in the food tech startup case, most of the money, or in some scenarios, are going to CapEx, and investors are not fans of CapEx. And then basically you have these super big clients and the sales cycles take 12 to 36 months to close one single proper corporate, and that single deal might be worth more than 100,000 clients of a SaaS startup. But in the meantime, in those 12 to 36 months, you have to find ways to get short-term revenue to keep the business alive and then to keep it attractive to investors, which is not very easy because investors want to see traction, but customers want to see capacity to supply. And if you don't have the money to invest in your machinery, CapEx, you will not be able to supply to your customers. So it's a long-term game.
Yeah, go ahead, Lauri. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of brilliance in the answers of both of the guys. I think what Alejandro said is it kind of means that in food tech you need a vision, both as a startup and as an entrepreneur, because you need to be able to plan out and vision what the company will look like in many years down the road, because you probably won't see the customers overnight. And what Pasi said, I think it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, if you make something that works, if you make something brilliant, the partners and customers will come.
Yeah, and in the meantime,
but you have to make something great.
When you don't have the machinery, you can outsource, then supply to your recurring customers, because investors will see traction, and then you're more attractive for an investment.
That's a really good way to wrap up our first part of the discussion today. This just kind of summarizes that really well. I think then we'll move on to the next part, which is kind of food tech today. And in order to talk about what the scene looks like today, I think we actually need to look back a little bit. And then I'd like to maybe hear, again, maybe from Lauri's side, how have you seen that the food tech scene has evolved over the past, let's say, 10 years? What is something new that is up and, in addition to, let's say, deliveries, which is something that everybody sees on the streets if you go to any city? I mean, what else has changed in the past 10 years in the food tech scene?
I mean, I might look old, but I have not been around at food tech for 10 years. So take all of these with a pinch of salt. So we just launched a fund like a month ago. So that's how long I've been hands-on involved in food tech VC world, obviously in the research for a bit longer. So some of the most interesting developments lately to me has been e-commerce, first of all. It kind of holds still a lot of promise for the future. So it's not living up to its full potential yet, but there's interesting developments there. Second, obviously, is the development with all kinds of plant-based products to replace the animal-based products. We're seeing a lot of new products every week, every day, and a lot of investments going in it in the past few years. I mean, if somebody would have told you about, Impossible Burger 10 years ago, you would have thought they're crazy. 5 years ago, it was still crazy. 2 years ago, was not crazy anymore. So that's something that is developing really fast.
Okay. How about Pasi? Do you have any other things that you have seen evolve over the past years, or what is like the hot thing that, you have multiple investors backing you up? What are the kind of things that are right now kind of at the top of the hype cycle, in your opinion, when talking about the food tech scene?
Technically, it's difficult to say. There are so many avenues through which the new food tech can appear, from e-commerce to GMOs to non-GMOs to business model innovation. So there are many different kinds. Perhaps one appearance of the peak is that it's good to realize and know that I would say all those funds who keep themselves respectful and have, for example, made their money around, let's say, broadly ICT in the last 10 to 20 years, all those funds would like to have some investments in food tech. So it has in only a handful of years become a mainstream area for venture capital investment, which it hardly was only a handful of years ago. It was only for hippies and vegans. But now what happened in the, I would say in the 80s, in the IT, if you could say ICT technology and sector at the time, what happened then in the 80s there is happening now in the food tech. So the money is going to those, from those players to those players who will lead the wave of emerging of a completely new kind of industrial sector. And I believe the big money has spotted this, that actually it might be that we replace 1,000 billion meat market with something else, and now the pie is kind of sliced between the big player, the Microsoft, in a way behind. So this has led into the flow of money into this, and there is a technological basis now to do it. So I don't see much bubble yet. Maybe this is just the beginning, because the technology is quite well respond to what is required by the investors.
Awesome. Did Lauri have a point you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, just mention that that's a really good point. I mean, the food industry, or the whole development of the technology, has been pretty much in hands of big companies in the past few decades. But now we're seeing, like Pasi mentioned, this emergence of startups in the food tech field, which obviously kind of helps to have all of that funding going in. But that's something that has been happening in the past few years. A lot more of the development is now happening in smaller companies, and investments also going in there massively.
Well, we
if I can add something here, those who have been in Finland for more than a year and possibly followed the elections last year, actually I talked to actually was a journalist from BBC last week, and we ran this simulation in head that when did you first hear about alternative proteins and plant-based meat as from other than hippies? And then the journalist was thinking, okay, maybe 4 years ago. And then you start to think that actually it was only 4 years ago that this thing started. And in the Finnish elections, even the most conservative parties were discussing about the sustainability of eating meat, if it's actually questionable to eat meat. And only in the previous elections, 4 or 5 years ago, it would be suicide for those parties and the leaders. So it has changed hugely in the attitudes only a handful of years. And when we see these waves coming, it's very difficult to imagine where we end up in 10 years.
I mean, the policy did not really change yet, but it's already good progress that we at least talking about it.
Yeah, it's kind of mental barriers that are broken here and there, and things start to move.
Very good. Let's talk a little bit actually more about kind of the differences in the food tech scene, maybe just in food as well, around the world. Alejandro, I mean, again, your background is from another continent, so you kind of have some perspective on, how food is seen there, and then perhaps also how the food tech scene is there compared to the Nordics. I mean, can you see any differences between one, food, just in general, how people treat food, and what's the role of food in culture? And then in the second point, I mean, I don't know if you have, but I mean, are there differences between, maybe food tech ideas in the Americas compared to the Europe or to the Nordics? Have you seen differences, regional differences in food, or just food tech?
Yeah, certainly. Leaving aside flavors and all of those cultural influenced factors, it's more regarding just the mindset. In Latin America, for example, people often are quite short-term minded, given the also external factors of the environment. They plan 2 years ahead, and taking into consideration that, for example, here in the Nordics, all of the basic needs of a human are covered. Like nobody's gonna starve to death here. They can think of how to improve the world rather than what am I gonna eat today. So if you're often thinking, this is in extreme cases, of course, this is not the whole Latin America that is, but that's like the consensus sort of. In the US, for example, of course, it's a completely different story. If you compare it to Europe, for example, EU legislation is a little bit tougher when it comes to introducing innovative food products into the market, which actually hinders the pace at which companies in Europe can innovate food-wise, because while you fight for the legislation to change, maybe a competitor or even your own pipeline has developed a lot more. And yeah, there's also a lot of like sticking to tradition, for example, in Latin America, but surprisingly, I have seen that here as well in Europe. A lot of people, they are intrigued by the cool factor of an innovative food product, but then they try it, they say, cool, I like it, but I'm not used to it, so I'm not gonna eat it on my daily basis. In the US, it's a little bit, it's also a bigger market, and yeah, you can influence a little bit more. What else? Well, you can also see all of those food innovations revolving around food waste. Food waste is upcycled foods are no longer a trend. They are a huge industry worth over 45 billion euros worldwide. And for example, in the US, more than a third of the supply of food is treated as waste. So a lot of industries, like the beverage industry, is being benefited from taking all of that waste and using it, because it's rejected by supermarkets, for example, because of their shape or physical appearances, but it still contains all of the nutrients that you need. So they make beverages that supply our bodies the nutrients it need. And on the other hand, we also have companies like Too Good To Go, Grim, here in the Nordics, that are taking all of that back into the food system, and Well Planned Jammer as well.
Awesome. He mentioned a bunch of cool companies there. Let's go a quick round circle here. Biggest successes and greatest failures within the food tech scene that you have come across, and maybe just some hypotheses why that happened. So biggest failures and then biggest successes that you have seen so far, maybe just like your own ideas why it was that happened to that company. Pasi, do you maybe want to start?
To name one company, maybe it's difficult. I guess all in all, it has been a big failure due to several reasons, perhaps just due to general awareness or lack of general awareness, what I was referring to previously, that we start to have, so that the high quality nutritional non-meat or plant-based products have not really been there, and therefore on the market, and therefore it has not been fair to expect that the consumer would opt for those. And now the startups are there basically to fill that in, so that once the products are good, maybe you can still make a difference between meat and meat alternative, but you're not really sure which one's better. And that's kind of the tipping point after which things start to move. So previously this didn't happen. So it's a big failure, and it's in a way unfortunate that the animal industry grew so big for the planet, I mean. And the biggest success is what we are seeing on the market. I guess Beyond Meat is synonym to many things. It's one company growing. It's not even that big yet in sales, but it's a symbol for the new movement and awareness, and that branding and product is of great success that all the companies like ourselves would benefit.
Lauri.
I could so kind of connecting from coming back to Beyond Meat. So I think one of the biggest failures in Europe is unfortunately how the regulation works around genetically engineered plants at the moment. So it has been kind of a shared failure within the European Union that we have failed to regulate plant breeding in a way that could have been very useful and productive for European agriculture, and which is lagging now behind in plant breeding in many ways. We could have, I mean, the trip for golden rice to get to the market was decades too long. We could already have crops that are disease resistant, so that you wouldn't need pesticides for them on the European fields, but we failed the regulation. So that's something we obviously need to fix in the coming years. It's not going to be an easy task, and it needs a lot of dynamite to fix it. But I really hope we can get over it. Now, in relation to that, Beyond Meat is beautiful. Maybe of those two, I like Impossible Foods even more. They are using very, very smartly biotech and genetically engineered microorganisms in their product, which is okay in US, but cannot be sold in Europe due to that regulation that we have screwed up a couple of decades ago. So in a way, that's amazing. But they have a bit more freedom to operate with these technologies in US. But if you would want to hear a European or Nordic success story, I really love what Oatly has done. I mean, fundamentally a research-based company a long time ago already, but they have really managed to put their product out there and also replace a lot of animal-based products. So I really tip my hat to Oatly.
Awesome. Alejandro.
Well, I would say a major fail it would be like the lack of understanding of GMOs, I would say, because people hear GMOs and they immediately, well, in some markets, of course, they immediately perceive it as a non-healthy product, but it could actually be better for you than the non-GMO. So that's a huge topic that we would talk for years about it. But yeah, I think it's just a shame that there is so misinformation. But on the other hand, a major win, I would say, a Danish company like Too Good To Go. They started a few years ago, and they are now all around Europe collecting tons of food waste and and taking it to people's homes. So that clearly reflects the demand for this type of companies. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Hey, then let's actually jump on to the last portion of this discussion. Let's talk about the future. I mean, in science fiction, you see people on spaceships eating pills, and then they get all the nutrients and everything from those pills. Now we're living in 2020, and we're still not eating pills. Why is that? And then, kind of, in your opinion, okay, Lauri, let's go. You take the first question here.
I just want to kill this whole pill thing before it even starts.
Okay.
I mean, you know that there are these things in science fiction that we kind of used to dream of, but they never happened, like nuclear-powered vacuum cleaners or whatnot. And humans eating only pills and smoothies and powders for sustenance. That's one of those visions that will never happen. I mean, we could technically do that, but the fact that we can do something doesn't mean that it will ever happen, because we don't want that. So that is a possible future, but that's not a future that we want. So eating and experiencing food and flavors and textures and all that is so tightly connected to food that eating pills, at least as long as we're on this planet, just won't be one of those futures that will happen. Sorry.
Okay, Alejandro, what is the future you envision? Let's say in 10 years, what will our food look like? Where will it be coming from? Yeah.
Well, definitely there will be a higher resource efficiency around every single crop as the world's population keep growing and the land suitable for crop growing keeps deteriorating. We need to make a better use of the crops that are harvested every year. I go back to coffee. It takes 2, 3, 4 years to grow a plant, and then it is just consumed 1% of it. But with the same crop, you could produce from biofuels to medicines for a lot of different diseases and skin treatments. And it is the same case for almost every crop. You will be then you will. I think we will continue to see pharmaceutical giants getting more into the food industry. They will tap into these technologies that are able to extract these molecules that we need in our bodies to maybe inhibit the activity of certain receptors that cause certain diseases, you name it, a lot of different things. And of course, the growing resistance, but also reluctancy to take antibiotics. You can have the same effects with plant extracts. People around the world are taking notice, and they are taking knowledge from the Chinese medicine as well and implementing it in Western medicine or Western supplements, for example. I agree with Lauri. We will never be feeding ourselves with pills. You can be the healthiest person and only eat because you need the fuel and so on and so on. But at the end of the day, everybody, the key purchasing factor for food is flavor. You are not gonna, unless you are an athlete or something. Yeah. And what else? Yeah, I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah. How about then, Pasi? I mean, what are the things that people are not now working on, but you assume that within 10 years, it'll be like the next big thing that people are working on, again, related to food production, things we consume?
One concrete example is that was actually something that I was thinking of answering basically your question in overall, is that people won't perhaps notice much. The consumer may not see big difference, if any at all, but behind the product, things might have completely changed. For example, in 10 years, it might be so. Let's say my grandchildren in 15 years from today, when they go to the fridge, if there would be an egg that is made by chicken, it might feel so strange. Why would you keep chicken and then there is the egg and you steal it and you feed the chicken? It's so unnecessary and stupid idea as a concept. If you would want only that nutritional value and the functionality of a scrambled egg. So you will have a scrambled egg, but how it was done is maybe there is a fermentation technology behind it, but you wouldn't see the difference as a consumer. And the same applies to milk. To keep cows to get milk is so unnecessary in 10 to 15 years, but you wouldn't see any change. But there was such no cow. So that's one thing. Then the second is that what I expect to develop a lot, but it's a bit difficult to describe exactly how, and there we might experience surprising developments, is a merger of technologies which might go under the umbrella of personalized nutrition. So there is data that is obtained through you, or some kind of, it requires the information communication layer, then it needs some sensoring, and then information on your body, continuous monitoring, then connected to some data from the nutrition. This is so complex that these kind of value chains, we still remain to be seen how it develops, and there we might have surprises. And then the outcome is just something that you don't notice an outcome, because when you feel better, you don't pay attention to it. It's just self-evident that you don't have stomach problems, for example.
Cool. And okay, now we got a lot of cool visions for the future. What are the potential things, Lauri, for example, what are the potential things stopping us from reaching this? So let's say we want to completely get a new substitute for milk, which feels like milk, but is produced in a more environmentally friendly way. What are the things standing in the way of that change? What needs to change, or what could potentially stop us from reaching that future?
You know, it would be easy to say that regulation and the public perception, but I think both of those are kind of those are not real obstacles. Like Pasi mentioned, those products will be as good as or better than the old ones, and at that point, people will want those things, and even the regulation. I mean, when the product is the same or safer, it can only put a little bit of brakes on the development on tops, but as eventually it will happen. I see no reason why, for example, producing those dairy proteins in new ways, for example in fermenters, why it wouldn't be cheaper and more resource efficient in actually very, very short period of time. So these changes will happen. Now the question is only how fast will they happen? And the society can obviously accelerate the change or try to break it, try to slow it down a bit, but those things will definitely happen. One of the interesting things that Pasi mentioned is the how our consumption will change. And that is definitely something that will happen. If you think of the human history, for thousands and thousands of years, we used to eat the stuff that we could get our hands on. So what was available. And now for a very short period of time, actually only for a few decades, in the global north, in the wealthy societies, we have all the foods available that we can dream of. And that is a very new situation. And I would say that will be a very short period in time where we as consumers go into a supermarket and make these irrational decisions, picking stuff from shelves and putting them into our systems. There will be better ways of making those decisions. There will be I'm not saying artificial intelligence, because I would like to think of it more as co-intelligence supporting our decision making. And that will not only impact the whole food system, but it will also impact our health tremendously. And it will impact the whole way of how we think of healthcare and preventive healthcare. And that's, again, like Alejandro said, a point where health tech, med tech, and food tech all kind of come together in the same game.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That was very good. Before we go into the questions that I just got in from the audience, last question that I have is let's say you would go back into the first day of starting to work on your idea, or first day of joining, kind of not officially, but kind of joining, becoming part of the food tech scene. What would be one piece of advice that you would give yourself if you were to kind of go back in time? Alejandro, you can go ahead first.
Slow down. Well, that's maybe a controversial statement from my side, because it's very difficult for us to slow down, but at the same time, every time we do it, we're able to achieve more. I remember the first year and a half, we were working Monday to Monday, no rest, for a lot of time, but then we were almost saturated, and we started taking Saturdays, half a Sunday off, and we achieved more in 4 months than in 18. So I would say definitely that. and to not stress because you don't know something today. Simply enjoy the learning process, which is easier said than done.
Really good. How about Lauri? What would be your piece of advice for yourself if you went back in time?
It's that's a very difficult question, but I would kind of like to repeat what Alejandro said about learning and listening. I mean, it's very, very important to just calm down and listen. Listen to what's out there, talk to people, absorb the insights that others have. But then the next thing that I would say generally to anyone getting into food tech is to think bold. I know that Alejandro and Pasi are both bold thinkers, and that's exactly what the food system needs right now. Don't satisfy just making things a bit better, but imagine a world where things are totally different, and then start working backwards from there and find the first steps to start. And to me, that one of those first steps is to find a vehicle, find a tool to work with, and I've been very fortunate to join a brilliant team and build a food tech fund, and I think that's one of the vehicles that we more broadly as a community also need.
Yeah. If I may add to that, I think that thinking long term is, I think, the best thing that you can do, even though all investors and all the key stakeholders tell you that you're being too ambitious or that it hasn't been done before and why would you be able to do it if they couldn't. And just, it doesn't matter if they cannot see it. If you see it, you can make it happen. That's it.
How about Pasi?
Yeah, maybe I can continue exactly from that point. So don't be frightened away. Trust your gut feeling, because there are two ways to kill the baby in the nest, as I say it. So either you say exactly what Alejandro said, that either you are told that this has already been done, or that why is it that no one else has done it. And either way, your baby could be killed with either of the comments. So you need to trust what you need to appreciate what others say. You need to learn, so you don't have to be kind of stubborn in that way. So learn, of course, but trust your vision, especially if you have a research background. You've been told by colleagues that it's already been done, or then it's too expensive, and there's no way to start to begin with. So trust that you can start with something even little, the first step, and plan the steps, and the investor, let's say Lauri's people, they see that there's a roadmap. Okay, it's 3 years to market, fine. What's the first step? And then you do only that, and it's actually very good evidence that to do it, and you have to do only that, but not more. And then there will be a second wave, and there where you put it in the whole problem in pieces. That's also called planning, but not to be frightened away with the huge task.
Maybe just a little insight from my history as a researcher. I kind of felt that easily that everything has been invented already. The deeper you dig, you find that somebody already did that, somebody did that, and then you come up with something that you think is absolutely brilliant and new, and the next day you go online and somebody already did it. So that's life of researcher. You have to work a lot to kind of get to that border where you realize that, okay, now I'm standing in a place where everything behind me has already been done, but everything ahead of me has not been done. And it takes a lot of work to get there. It takes a lot of talking to people. It takes a lot of listening to people who have already done amazing things. And then you arrive to the place where you know that now I kind of know everything that has been done, and then you can push the border even further. So be patient and listen to people and listen to all the amazing things that have been already done, and then take a moment and go crazy and think wild and push even further.
Awesome. That's a lot of good advice for people in the audience. Thank you so much. I think now we'll go on to the last portion of this discussion. I have 4 questions that have been chosen from the audience that I'll now be asking from you guys. Hopefully, if you have time, and people, if you have other questions that you really want to get answered by our panelists here today, be sure to send them a tweet, and then hopefully they'll have the time to get back to you to your amazing question regarding something we've talked here today. But now let's go into the last portion and the audience questions. And I have 4 questions here. And the first one that we'll start with will be directed to Alejandro. I think he's the best one to answer this question. In what way do you think that the Nordic mentality has helped your professional path?
Sorry, hello, you froze for a second.
Okay,
Can
there
you
we
repeat
go.
the question,
So,
please?
in what way do you think that the Nordic mentality has helped your professional path?
In a lot of ways, I think. I mean, being here has opened the doors to a lot of opportunities which we couldn't have gotten, not even in Colombia, but not even in London. It's the market dynamics and the mindset is very different here. It has pros and cons. From an investment point of view, yeah, there's more elsewhere, and there's a little bit more risk aversion in the Nordics, but at the same time, there is this mentality of you can do more with less, and there's also this collaborative environment which is very, or which was very alien to me coming from Colombia, because in Colombia the business environment is very hostile. People are trying to get forward in their careers or in their business at the expense of others. Here people want to move forward together, and that's why I think the Nordics have been so successful since ever. Well, yeah.
Awesome. Then a question towards Lauri. I think this is something that we kind of discussed already, but just to kind of, this is maybe one of the big problems facing all research heavy kind of companies or ideas. So the question goes, usually for startups, the best way to get seed funding is having an MPV. But how does it work with FoodTech startups? Because with FoodTech technology, mostly the innovation is research heavy and does require time and capital. So kind of what is your advice to people who have an idea, but kind of really need the time and somehow resources in order to have an MVP?
MVP is nice. I mean, when it comes to, if it is a food product, it's really nice if I can taste it. I mean, you couldn't even imagine all the crazy stuff I've been trying, putting in my mouth in the past couple of years. It's been fun. But there's, like Pasi mentioned, a lot of the technology is something that the consumers will never realize that is, you know, a new product. A lot of the innovation happens upwards in the supply chain. But making prototypes and MVPs should be easy. I mean, just take the level low enough. You can probably, you know, put one together in your kitchen. Not for all the products, but think creative. You don't always need millions to put up a prototype for your product. But yes, you're right. I mean, quite often it needs something physical to be done, but it doesn't need to be in scale. It doesn't need to be something that you can make, you know, a lot of. Hack together a prototype. It's a really good way to start and start experimenting.
And there's also so many funds in the Nordics to basically help entrepreneurs get their MVP.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you are seeing too many barriers to make an MVP, the barriers are in your head maybe, because you can 100% do it if you try it.
I mean, now depending on if you mean MVP as something that you have already sold to an actual customer, that's not, I mean, we're not expecting to see that from the companies that we're making investments in.
Exactly. Cool. 2 more questions left. I think the next one is best maybe suited for Pasi. The question goes, how can analytics and data science help improve food tech companies?
There are so many ways. I guess that's another area of food is just another area for data and thinking of a data application for a certain solution. A startup needs to have focus. So, for example, the applying data for solving something can be very narrow and very specific. And in food tech, I can imagine there are many opportunities as elsewhere. So, broadly answering that I guess how it could not be applied is to try to make it too broad. So maybe that's my advice. So to make it focus down the problem as much as you can and make the data application case to that only, and that based on only that one application there can be a company. If there's another area that is in your mind, maybe it's a subject of another company. So to have focus is maybe my broad comment.
Got it. Okay. And then actually the last question, I think what we can do here is that any of you who feels like you have an answer or an opinion, you can just jump in. So the question goes, how do you change the attitude towards meat consumption in the developing world? Food alternatives are still a very elite subject. How do we approach this in lower income communities?
Maybe one answer. Yeah, one answer to
Lauri
that.
First. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, by example, I mean, generalizing really harshly here, many of the development in many of the developing countries is they want to consume more like we consume here. Let's just, you could say that Finland is only 5 million people. It doesn't really matter what we're eating here, but it does. It matters a lot because we are showing example. If we can change our diets here towards more plant-based and sustainable, it will have a huge impact elsewhere as well. So that's to start with. I mean, there is not any action is not too small. Everything big always started from small. So we have to lead by example.
Awesome. Pasi.
Yeah, I was about to say that mostly the food problem has to do with the most developed world because of the concept of consuming animal-based products. So the developing world, the diets are more sustainable and more environmentally friendly to start with. So would it be possible never really to go to mostly animal-based? And I believe what is happening also now is that also has to do with my age and having been born in late 70s, and then to my parents, that there were in my youth and in my experience there are some status symbols in your life, maybe heritage from your families, and in the Finnish case, they have experienced the 40s and the 50s where there were even a bit hunger. So the animal-based products and meat carried huge status with it. And now I can see that my children, now in the teenage, they wouldn't care less of the association to meat being a status symbol. Another example is having a driving license. They don't really care. But when I was young, it was a must to have a driving license and, maybe a car and things like that. So this is a lengthy way to explain that, and referring also to what Lauri said, that showing an example by the developed world is essential in the way that if the status doesn't go around meat, but it goes to the products that are next or after meat. So therefore, you skip kind of the problem, and I think that's possible to achieve.
Awesome. Alejandro, any last comments?
Yeah, I think one of maybe underlying problem behind the perhaps the slow pace at which poorer countries or less rich countries are advancing in food-wise is that countries like Colombia, for example, we manufacture or they manufacture all the agricultural products. They sell it to the US and Europe. Here, they give value to those products in the form of finished products. And then because these developed countries are consuming these products, we buy them back from them. So, and they are super expensive. But if we teach how Lauri said by example, we can show those countries or inspire potential entrepreneurs in those countries to actually retain the value of the agricultural products within those countries. They will be cheaper and they will be able to commercialize healthier and more affordable products for like the big portion of the society rather than only for the ones who can pay. Because right now the sustainable and healthy products come at a premium price because, well, they come from a deteriorating land. But then if you send it to Europe and then buy it back from Europe, it's going to be triple the price at least. So yeah, to sum it up, keep it local and then you can produce a lot more cheaper.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for this discussion today. This was an awesome event. Actually, my first kind of virtual discussion that I've been hosting. And if you, in the audience, if you have any more questions, I hope you can send them via Twitter to the participants. Maybe we can get the slide with all the Twitter handles up for the last few minutes here, so you can get the Twitter handles of our panelists. On my behalf, thank you so much for your time here today, and thank you to the audience for the awesome questions, awesome comments. There came a lot. And hopefully you can continue the discussion over on Twitter. And then hopefully you'll have an amazing rest of the week. And then also good luck to all three panelists in your future things you'll be doing. Are there any big announcements that we should be looking for in the future?
Yes, Peik, thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank all of you very much for joining us. Thank you, Lauri, Pasi, Alejandro, and of course, Peik for coming. It has been a seriously and super insightful panel discussion, and I hope that everyone in the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. So yes, as you mentioned, last but not least, short advertising moment. I wanted to remind you that our last major event before summer is coming up next week. The Digital Prototyping Week. It's from the 25th to the 28th of May. It is a 4-day program in which the participating teams will learn the processes and techniques necessary to create a prototype, and then will be able to test a digital MVP, which will be then judged at the end by a jury of professionals. We're going to use Figma and no particular experience is needed, so registrations are still open. So if you have an idea you would like to develop or you want just to join a team, you can still do it. I've also been reading in a comment section that there will be a FoodTech Hackathon in June. So if you're interested, you can find additional information there. I think that Vivian was the participant who shared that information. So you can just scroll and look at it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, please, to the audience, remember to fill out the feedback form that you're going to receive in a few minutes. That will help us a lot also in creating more kind of quality content events in the future. And yeah, again, thank you very much for joining, and I wish you all a great evening. So yeah, I can share again the panel for the Twitter. So if any one of you wants to tweet to the speakers, can do it. And yeah, great.
Can we take a screenshot with all the speakers?
Yeah, if someone from the audience wants to activate the camera.
Yeah, we can do it.
Yeah.
Or yeah, at least with the speaker, and then we can have a gallery view of.
Awesome. I see
everybody.
Okay.
Great. Ah, Vina is here.
Yes. She's
Hello.
the old, yeah, she's a friend of the shortcut.
Awesome. Aurora, will you do it?
Yep. So.
Okay. Say, I don't know, say vegan.
Peace.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.